All right. So we're rounding out here. I've successfully done the camera as I showed, and I tweaked a few things to clean it up a bit. Now, I think the next step is to redo the units. My reason for redoing the units, and I'm going to get weird and technical here, is that the character type in Unreal has a capsule collider and a bunch of pre-built stuff that I'm sure is very beneficial for a certain type of character, but for things like vehicles, for example, it's actually gets in the way. It's really annoying. So I'm restarting with Pawn as my base, which is a little more empty than a character, but in kind of a good way, in like a clean way. So I'm going to use the Pawn as my base from now on. Inconveniently, I'm making it a dark camo tank. The tanks of Pawn, the Empire of Pawn, as opposed to the tan tanks of Characteria. I'm such a nerd. I am deeply demoralized. I have run into a big issue with how Unreal does characters. And I'm apparently not the only one, judging from what other people are saying online. Basically, Unreal's default character only has a capsule collider, and that is the only thing that can do collisions at all. On the other hand, you have pawns. Pawns are sort of like the like a character is a type of pawn, but it's a very specific kind of pawn. Pawns have no pre-existing anything, which is great if you need something custom, right? So I thought, okay, well, I'll remake the units as pawns because then they're more flexible. Problem is that pawns have no inherent movement code at all, or gravity, or anything. You can put this thing called a floating pawn movement on, but then it just kind of wishily-washily flops from one side to another. So I'm at a really fucking annoying crossroad right now, where I basically have to pick whether I want to do my units as characters using a shitty capsule collider and then have a bigger box around that, and then I have to program a whole thing where when one bumps into the other, it goes, oh, I don't want to bump into you, I actually want to change the direction I'm going. Or alternatively, like, it's stupid that I have to do that. Or alternatively, use pawns, which can have their whole own collision, but where I have to fucking program how they move completely myself. Which for someone's first project programming is pretty fucking, it's a huge oversight on Epic's part. Gotta say, I long hated Unity, the game engine. I just don't think it's a fully featured experience. But there have been a couple things over the years that have bugged me about Unreal. This one takes the cake. I think I know what I'm gonna do. So basically, as I said before, I had a few options of where I could go. But basically, I think like going the pawn route and programming my entire own movement system is probably not the right call. I don't think I could do a good enough job of that on my own. So I think what I'll do is I'll use the character as the base, and I'll make it a little tiny ball, and I'll put that at the middle of it, and I'll say, that's the ground. That's its gravity, component, which is fine, and it won't be involved in any collisions at all. And basically what I'll do is I'll put a box around the outside of the unit that says, hey, when these two things overlap, I want you to align yourself with that direction and then go that way. So I have to do some math, I guess, to figure that out. But this almost broke me. I was on the verge of getting a really expensive plugin, actually, to help me in this process, but it didn't feel right. I felt like the right call is to try to do as much as in vanilla Unreal unplugged as possible. I've long held that I'm not huge on plugins. I think that relying on other third parties for essential stuff in your game is dangerous. You know, we had that issue with blobs. But I'm going to try this, because I think the thing is even if I got the expensive plugin that actually had different colliders and stuff, I still need to get the AI to actually turn when it bumps into each other. So I think I'll try to write that out and figure out how to do that. But for now, I'm done for today. I'm gonna have some dinner. Might play some Command & Conquer. Get re-inspired as to why I'm doing this in the first place. And come back to it when I can. So, yesterday was a setback. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to focus on just doing the best I can to rebuild the project in a new project, because I kind of messed it up a bit, and make it nice and clean and ready to keep going with this process, because now that I've made my decision about using the character. I'm with her. But we press forward. I've gotten back to where I was before, which is good. Gotten back to where I was before and cleaner, which I suppose is sort of the point. So you can now do the full suite of selection mechanics, the full camera mechanics. You click on the unit, right click, and they'll move. So we're back to that point. Now what I need to do is figure out the best way to implement what I'm calling the box blocker, which is basically, since I can't actually give the units collision, I'm going to give them just that avoidance cube, right? So if they overlap with it, they're going to go, oh, I can't go here, so I'm going to go another direction. So I'm going to see how that goes. That'll be my next thing, but I don't know how long that's going to take. Might need some help with it. We'll see. Getting somewhere. Let me show you. Okay, so I'm realizing now that one of the problems I was facing was that I was telling all of the units to go to the exact same spot, which was overriding all of their ability to not run into each other. So now what I have is, if you grab your units, when I tell them to go somewhere, you see all these spots? I'm basically telling them to create a formation out of it. Now right now it's really rudimentary, but as you can see, they actually, don't get all clumped up. And if I grab these guys and tell them to go over here, you can see they navigate around the other units and get there. I think this was sort of my fatal perspective flaw. You can see the circle there. That's that stupid capsule collider. And it's big and it's dumb and it's round, but it's not the actual collision of the unit that matters. Mostly. For example, you can see this guy here has failed to get there, so I still have some work to do, but progress. I have had to admit defeat. I wasn't quite able to get the whole sending them to different locations thing working correctly on my own. I could send them to different locations, but it was always like a weird arbitrary direction based on the world space. And as it turns out, that was because I was not turning it. So I had to do a bunch of weird math and some other checks to do that, and as much as I tried, I couldn't get it. So I had to enlist the help of Andrew and David to figure out how best to angle things. But now that I've done that, the formation, as it's called, like, which is basically the points that I send each given unit in the selection to, properly angles itself according to the direction the unit is coming from. So if you send them to one, they'll go there, and if you turn them around, they'll go the other way. So yeah, I'm gonna start with that. Now I can go in and actually arrange it so that the first unit goes here, the second unit goes to its right, the third unit goes to its left, the fourth unit goes behind it, so it's sort of, if you have a bunch of them, it turns into a big blob. If it's a couple, they turn into a small blob. And yeah, so I'm going to start figuring out how to get that going. I also implemented a very rudimentary version of something called Detour Crowd controllers, I guess, which basically forces them to go around each other, and it's mostly working. They do get stuck on each other sometimes, but I'm going to try to figure out how to best implement that. But that might need to be tweaked later. For now, it's good enough for me to get the basics started, and that's what I'm going to do. Unit selection, unit moving, mostly kind of working. So next is refining things down a little bit. So that'll be the next one. For now, I think I'll end this one here. See you next time.